Most people wake up every morning and let their mind run on autopilot. Same thoughts, same worries, same excuses. And then they wonder why their life hasn't changed in 10 years. Here's the truth: most people don't want to hear your mornings are secretly programming your future. I didn't learn this in a book. I learned it the hard way through wasted time, wrong priorities, and lessons that took me a decade to finally understand. If you can master your mind in the first few minutes of your day, you don't need motivation, you become unstoppable. Most of the frustration you feel in life doesn't come from what happens to you. It comes from the argument you have in your head about what shouldn't be happening. That took me years to understand. I used to think peace would come when life finally cooperated, when people behaved the way I expected, when plans worked out, when timing made sense. But life doesn't negotiate. It never has, and it never will. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you stop wasting energy fighting reality. Here's the hard truth: you don't control what happens to you. You never did. You don't control traffic, other people's opinions, the economy, delays, rejection, or unexpected loss. And the moment you try to control those things, you hand your peace away. But what you do control fully, completely, at all times is how you respond. And that's where real power lies. Think about how much suffering comes from resistance. Something goes wrong, and instead of adapting, we say, "This shouldn't be happening." Someone disrespects us, and instead of staying grounded, we spiral for days replaying it in our head. A plan falls apart, and instead of adjusting, we shut down. That resistance is optional. Pain may be unavoidable, but suffering is often a choice. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago. They didn't waste time wishing for a different reality. They trained their minds to meet reality as it is, not as they wished it to be. And once you internalize that, everything changes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What's the best response right now?" That single shift turns obstacles into training. Most people think strength is about controlling the external world. It's not. Strength is staying calm when things don't go your way. Strength is choosing your behavior even when emotions are screaming for control. Strength is responding with intention instead of reacting on impulse. And that strength is built moment by moment, especially when it's hardest. Here's where mornings matter. The first thing most people do when they wake up is mentally hand control away. They check their phone, absorb stress, scroll through problems they can't solve yet, and immediately react. They start the day already defeated by circumstances. But if you train your mind in the morning to remember this truth, that you control your response, you walk into the day grounded, not shaken. Because let's be real, something will go wrong today. Someone will test your patience. Something won't happen the way you want. That's not pessimism, that's realism. And realism is empowering when you're prepared for it. When you expect obstacles, they stop feeling personal. You stop taking life so personally. You stop thinking the universe is against you. This is where emotional mastery comes in. You don't ignore your emotions, but you don't let them drive the car either. You observe them, you acknowledge them, and then you decide how to act anyway. That's not suppression, that's leadership. You become the leader of your own mind. Over time, this practice changes your identity. You're no longer the person who gets easily rattled, offended, or overwhelmed. You become someone who stays steady under pressure, and people notice that. Opportunities come to people who are calm in chaos. Trust is given to people who don't panic. Confidence grows in people who know they can handle whatever shows up. And here's the part no one tells you: when you stop trying to control life, life becomes easier to manage. You waste less energy on anger. You recover faster from setbacks. You move forward instead of getting stuck emotionally. You stop letting temporary situations create permanent moods. This lesson took me years because it's simple, but it's not easy. It requires daily awareness. It requires catching yourself mid-reaction and choosing a better response. It requires humility, the humility to accept that life doesn't owe you comfort, but the reward is inner freedom. And inner freedom is worth more than any external win, because when you finally understand that you don't control life, but you have to control your response, nothing can truly shake you anymore. Most people think their day starts when they get out of bed. It doesn't. Your day starts with the very first thought you allow into your mind. And that thought is powerful enough to shape everything that follows. I didn't realize this for a long time. I used to wake up already behind, already stressed, already reacting. I'd grab my phone, check messages, scroll through noise, and before I even stood up, my mind was cluttered. I hadn't done anything yet, but I was already tired. That's when I learned this lesson the hard way. If you don't choose your mindset in the morning, the world will choose it for you. The first few minutes after you wake up are a quiet window where your mind is most impressionable. You're not fully armored yet. Whatever you feed it in that moment sinks deeper. Stress sinks deeper. Confidence sinks deeper. Fear sinks deeper. Focus sinks deeper. That's why mornings are not just routines, they're programming. You are literally setting the ceiling for how focused, disciplined, and emotionally resilient you'll be for the rest of the day. Most people wake up and immediately go reactive. They look at their phone, read something that triggers them, compare themselves to someone else, or jump straight into problems. And then they wonder why the rest of the day feels chaotic. You can't start your day in reaction and expect to live it with intention. It doesn't work that way. When you take control of your morning, you take control of your nervous system. You remind yourself before the noise starts what actually matters. You slow your breathing. You ground yourself. You choose your thoughts instead of inheriting them. That's not spiritual fluff. That's mental discipline. And discipline in the morning makes discipline easier everywhere else. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes practical. The Stoics believed in preparing the mind before the day began. They didn't wait for problems to show up before deciding how to respond. They rehearsed calm. They rehearsed restraint. They reminded themselves that challenges were coming and that they were capable of handling them. When you do that in the morning, life doesn't catch you off guard as easily. Think about how different your day feels when you start it with clarity instead of chaos. When you remind yourself that you can't control everything, but you can control your effort, your attitude, and your response. Suddenly, obstacles feel smaller. You're not scrambling emotionally. You're moving deliberately. Your morning doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be intentional. Even a few minutes of stillness, reflection, or focused breathing can completely change how you show up, because what you're really doing is sending a signal to yourself, I'm in control here, and when your mind believes that, your behavior follows. Over time, this practice rewires how you think. You stop waking up anxious. You stop dreading the day. You stop feeling like life is happening to you. Instead, you feel centered, prepared, grounded. And from that state, you make better decisions. You speak more calmly. You react less. You waste less energy. This is why motivation alone doesn't last. Motivation is emotional and unpredictable. Morning mindset is structural. It builds a foundation that doesn't depend on how you feel. When your foundation is strong, the day can shake, but you won't collapse. The real secret is this: the way you start your day is how you train your mind to handle life. If you start rushed, you'll live rushed. If you start scattered, you'll live scattered. If you start intentionally, you'll live intentionally. That pattern compounds. One day at a time, it quietly reshapes your identity. And eventually, you reach a point where your mornings don't just set the tone, they protect your peace. You don't need the day to go perfectly to feel grounded. You've already anchored yourself before it began, because when you master your mindset in the morning, the rest of the day no longer controls you. For a long time, I thought I needed to feel ready before I took action. I thought I needed confidence first, motivation first, clarity first. And every time I waited for those feelings to show up, nothing changed. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into years. That's when I learned one of the most uncomfortable lessons of all. Motivation doesn't create action. Action creates motivation. And discipline is the bridge between the life you want and the life you keep putting off. Motivation is emotional. It comes and goes. Some mornings you wake up fired up. Other mornings you don't want to move at all. If your progress depends on how you feel, your progress will always be inconsistent. Discipline, on the other hand, doesn't care about your mood. Discipline is a decision you make in advance. It's choosing to do what matters, even when every part of you wants to delay, distract, or quit. This is where most people get stuck. They wait until it feels easy. They wait until they feel confident. They wait until fear disappears. But fear doesn't disappear before action. It disappears because of action. Confidence isn't the starting point. It's the byproduct. Every disciplined action you take is a vote for the person you're becoming, even when no one sees it. Think about how identity is formed. You don't wake up one day disciplined. You prove it to yourself through repetition. You show up when it's uncomfortable. You follow through when excuses are loud. And slowly, quietly, your self-image changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does. Discipline also removes mental friction. When you decide ahead of time what you're going to do, there's less debate in your head. You don't waste energy negotiating with yourself every morning. You already decided. That clarity creates momentum, and momentum creates consistency. This is where mornings and discipline connect. When you practice small acts of discipline early in the day, getting up when you said you would, moving your body, focusing your mind, you're training yourself to follow through. You're teaching your brain that your word matters. And once your brain believes that, discipline stops feeling like force and starts feeling like alignment. The Stoics believed in acting according to principle, not emotion. They didn't ask, do I feel like it? They asked, is this the right thing to do? That shift changes everything. When your actions are guided by values instead of feelings, you become reliable, and reliability is a form of power. Most people underestimate how much self-trust matters. Every time you say you're going to do something and don't, you lose a little trust in yourself. Every time you follow through, even when it's hard, you gain it back. Discipline is how you rebuild that trust. And self-trust is what makes confidence real. This doesn't mean pushing yourself to exhaustion or living in constant grind. Discipline isn't punishment, it's self-respect. It's saying, my future matters more than my comfort in this moment. It's understanding that temporary discomfort leads to long-term freedom. There will be days when discipline feels heavy, days when you're tired, days when progress feels invisible. That's normal. That's part of the process. Discipline isn't about intensity, it's about consistency. Small actions, repeated daily, shape your life far more than occasional bursts of motivation ever will. And here's the shift that changes everything. Once discipline becomes part of who you are, motivation becomes unnecessary. You don't need to hype yourself up. You don't need external pressure. You simply do what needs to be done. And from that place, progress becomes inevitable. Because when discipline leads and motivation follows, you stop waiting for change, and you become the reason it happens. One of the biggest sources of pain in life isn't what happens to us, it's what we cling to. I didn't understand that for a long time. I thought suffering came from bad luck, difficult people, missed opportunities, or circumstances I couldn't control. But over time, I started to notice a pattern. Two people could go through the same situation, and one would move on while the other stayed stuck for years. The difference wasn't the event. It was the attachment. We get attached to outcomes. We get attached to how people should treat us. We get attached to timelines, titles, validation, and versions of life we imagine would happen by now. And when reality doesn't match that image, we suffer. Not because reality is unbearable, but because we refuse to let go of what we expected. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't say, don't care. They said, care wisely. There's a difference. Detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's loving fully without needing control. It's giving your best effort without tying your peace to the result. And once you understand that, life becomes lighter. Most emotional pain comes from trying to extract certainty from an uncertain world. We want guarantees. We want reassurance. We want control. But the more tightly you grip, the more anxious you become. Detachment loosens that grip. It reminds you that you can show up, do your part, and still be okay no matter how things turn out. Think about how often we replay moments in our head. Something someone said, something that didn't work out, something we wish we could redo. That mental loop is attachment in disguise. We're attached to a past we can't change or a future we can't control. And the mind keeps suffering long after the moment has passed. Detachment brings you back to the present. It says, what's here right now? Not what should have happened, not what might happen, just what is. And from that place, you regain power. You stop bleeding energy into things that no longer deserve it. This doesn't mean you stop caring about goals or relationships. It means you stop making your self-worth dependent on them. You stop saying, I'll be at peace when this works out, or I'll be happy when they change. Peace becomes something you carry, not something you wait for. When you detach, rejection loses its sting. Criticism becomes information instead of identity. Failure becomes feedback instead of a verdict. You still feel emotions, but they don't control you. They move through you instead of trapping you. This is especially important in the morning. If you wake up already attached to how the day needs to go, you're setting yourself up for frustration. But if you start the day grounded, reminding yourself that you'll do your best and accept the rest, you move through challenges with steadiness. You don't get shaken by every small disruption. Detachment also frees you from other people's approval. You stop performing. You stop chasing validation. You stop measuring your worth by reactions and responses. And in that freedom, you show up more authentically. Ironically, when you stop needing approval, you often gain more respect. Letting go is uncomfortable at first. The ego resists it. It feels like losing control. But what you're really losing is unnecessary suffering. You're choosing peace over ego, clarity over chaos. Over time, detachment builds emotional resilience. You bounce back faster. You recover quicker. You don't carry yesterday into today. And that lightness allows you to focus on what actually matters, your actions, your values, your growth. Because when you stop attaching your happiness to outcomes you can't control, you gain a level of freedom most people never experience. For most of my life, I didn't realize how powerful the voice in my head really was. I thought it was just noise, random thoughts, background commentary, nothing serious. But over time, I started to see the pattern. The way I spoke to myself in quiet moments was shaping how I showed up in public ones. Long before action, long before results, there was a sentence playing on repeat inside my mind, and that sentence was quietly building my future. Your inner dialogue is the most consistent influence in your life. It's there when no one else is. It speaks when things go wrong and when things go right. And whether you're aware of it or not, you're responding to it all day long. The problem isn't that we have negative thoughts, it's that we believe them without question. Most people talk to themselves in ways they would never talk to someone they care about. They replay mistakes. They exaggerate failures. They predict worst-case outcomes. And over time, those thoughts don't just affect mood, they become identity. You don't just think you're not good enough. You start living like it. This is where real change begins. Not with hype, not with motivation, but with awareness. You have to catch the thought before it becomes a belief. You have to notice the language you're using internally. Because words create pictures, and pictures create emotions, and emotions drive behavior. When you tell yourself, I always mess things up, your brain looks for proof. When you say, I can't handle this, your body responds with tension and hesitation. But when you shift the language, even slightly, you shift your state. This is hard, but I can figure it out. I've handled worse than this. This doesn't define me. Those aren't lies. They're grounded, resilient truths. The Stoics believed in governing the mind through reason. They didn't deny emotion, but they didn't let unexamined thoughts run the show. They understood that you don't control every thought that enters your mind, but you do control which ones you entertain. And that choice is everything. Your morning is the best place to practice this. Before the world starts talking to you, you decide how you're going to talk to yourself. You set the tone. You remind yourself of what you can control, what matters, and who you're choosing to be today. That repetition rewires your brain over time, not overnight. Over time, this isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about refusing to let one moment define your entire story. It's about responding to setbacks with strength instead of self-attack, because self-attack doesn't make you better, it makes you smaller. Consistency is what changes your inner voice. The more you interrupt negative loops and replace them with steady, grounded thoughts, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, You don't have to force it. Your mind defaults to resilience instead of criticism. And here's the deeper truth. The way you speak to yourself is the relationship you'll never escape. You carry it into every room, every challenge, every decision. If that voice is supportive, life feels lighter. If it's harsh, everything feels harder than it needs to be. You don't need to silence your inner critic. You need to outgrow it. You do that by choosing better words, better thoughts, and better responses, especially when it matters most. Because when you change the conversation in your mind, you change the direction of your life. Everything you want in your life begins and ends with how you train your mind. You don't need a different past, different people, or perfect circumstances. You need awareness, discipline, and intention. When you stop fighting what you can't control, take ownership of how you start your day, act with discipline instead of emotion, release attachment to outcomes, and choose better thoughts, you become unshakable. This isn't about becoming someone new overnight. It's about showing up a little stronger, a little calmer, and a little more intentional every single day. And if you do that consistently, one morning you'll wake up and realize your life has changed because you did